Welcome to We're Gonna Run It with Joe Lisi and former National Coach of the Year, Terry Bowden. Coach, dogs were barking all last Saturday. Upsets across the top 25, none bigger than the Florida State upset of Alabama. Just give me your thoughts about what transpired last Saturday.
Well, we just had great football. I mean, every game we watched, the big ones, they were all close. They were all well fought, hard, close. Didn't know who was going to win. A lot of upsets, but they were upsets that were very close that could have gone either way. So I think we saw some things held true. Teams that could run the ball, didn't turn the ball over, played great defense. When it came to a big game, that's what wins ball games.
You and I sat here. We broke down the
Mhm.
matchup in Tallahassee. I said
Yeah,
to you, all Florida State has to do is just make it a four-quarter game. And that's
right.
exactly what they did. They had a 14-point lead late in the fourth quarter. I mean, Thomas Castellanos, he talked the talk, but he also stepped up and played absolutely lights out. I mean, that was an amazing offensive defensive line effort. Have you ever seen an Alabama team just come out lethargic like that in week number one?
Well, they just couldn't. They couldn't figure out the offense, and it baffles me how you could be unprepared to stop uh, the style of offense that Gus Malzahn has when all he's ever done is line up against Alabama year after year after year, doing the same style of offense. I don't know if the Alabama staff was mostly from different parts of the country or what, but they couldn't figure it out. It was totally unprepared to stop that. And of course, the book on Gus Malzahn is as big as War and Peace. It's a book. It's everybody knows what he does. But you know what? I said earlier before the game, if the quarterback Tommy Castellanos can mesh with Gus Malzahn, and they can put together that style, they're going to have a whole different team. And it almost looks like Alabama watched the 24th season and didn't go back and watch all the years that Gus Malzahn has run what he runs because they couldn't stop it. So great job of executing the plan. Florida State's defense played aggressive, played energetic with emotion, and Alabama had no running attack. And that's when they win ball games at Alabama, they run the ball down your throat.
Coach, that was their first opening season loss in a week one matchup dating back to 2001 when they lost to UCLA in Tuscaloosa, right? We talk about week one
Right,
matchups, and I have sat here and told you that the SEC and teams like Alabama, especially in a week one environment,
right.
fear nobody, right? They've won out and played teams like USC and Wisconsin and Virginia Tech. We saw them in week one matchups, West Virginia. You know, this was the lowest spread just from the gambling
Right.
perspective that we have seen dating back, I believe it was like 2010 or 2011 when they faced off against Ryan Williams and Virginia Tech, and they won that matchup right around 10 points. So you just see the body of work from Nick Saban to Kalen DeBoer. And we've been on social media all week, all weekend.
Right.
We've seen, pundits come out and say the offensive lineman was basically practicing with his phone in hand. They came out flat. They were laughing at the end of the game when they're getting their butts kicked down 14 points. Just
Right.
untypical Alabama. Is there a way to regroup with Kalen DeBoer? Because I told you, it's go big or go home. It's like coaching the New York Yankees. You get blown out in a game like that, you better step up, especially in the SEC.
Well, that's what he was hired to be able to do. If you can't get your team's attention before a big game, that's one thing. But after you get beat by a team like Florida State that was such an underdog, and it was so disheartening, you've got to pull your team together. And we'll find out what they're made of. But I will say this: in a matter of 2 years, they've played four teams at Alabama that they were favored, and the underdogs were double-digit underdogs and all four beat Alabama. Alabama's no longer feared. Within 2 years, they're not feared. You don't go, oh no, 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 we're playing Alabama. And I remember when I first went to the SEC, when you got to Alabama, they were defending national champions, and they played kind of at a different speed than everybody else. But that's not the case right now. Right now, I don't know if Alabama can get it back or how long it's going to take to get it back, but they're not feared like Alabama typically is, and that's going to be a tough one to overcome.
We talk about Alabama. They only rushed for 87 yards on the ground, 3 yards per carry. They allowed 230 rushing yards to the Florida State Seminoles. Florida State averaged 4.7 yards per carry. Going back to last year, this was an inept offense. They only averaged 89 rushing yards per game. So you saw the complete 360 by Mike Norvell and his new defensive coordinator, Tony White, and basically, predicating physicality, offense and defensive line play.
Right.
That's what won the game. But we talked about Thomas Castellanos. He accounts for basically 220 yards of total offense, a $154 through the air, 78 on the ground. I mean, could he be a Heisman Trophy candidate if he leads the Seminoles to potentially a 10-2 overall record?
Well, the Heisman is a publicity award. It's not always given to the best NFL prospect. It's given to the guy that creates the most excitement. I was a voter for about 15 years when I was in the media, and it's voted on by news people, by media people, and so it's a little bit of hype involved, And so if he can turn this team that much around, he'll get in the picture. But right now, the biggest thing is he doesn't get that far ahead. Tommy's one of those guys that can get out there on a limb now and talk about all the things that they're doing and gonna do and how bad you are and how good we are. They need to make sure he didn't get too far out there. Focus one game at a time, because FSU isn't that far removed from a fragile attitude toward from what they had last year. They've won. They've got a new energy, a new excitement. Focus on the next game. They've got some big ones down the road in their schedule. They need to win these ones that they're supposed to win, like next week, and then make sure they're ready to go against the other big teams they play. They play Florida. They play Miami. They play Clemson. They've got some big football games down the road in this schedule.
Schedule lines up, I think, for at least an 8-win season, as long as they don't get ahead of themselves and deal with any major injuries. I'm with you. I was very impressed with that defensive effort. We'll talk about Kalen DeBoer a little bit later in the show. The other marquee matchup took place in Columbus, right? Early matchup. We saw Texas struggle from an offensive perspective. We talk about how dominant Ohio State was over the past 6 seasons since 2019.
Right.
They were 30-3 straight up at home in the Horseshoe. That defense looked lights out. We had concerns about Jim Knowles moving on. Matt Patricia had that defense dialed up. But more importantly, Arch Manning looked like a deer in the headlights.
Yeah, he really did show his inexperience. I think, unfortunately, we all put that pressure on him, or the media put that pressure on him. He's the next Eli, Peyton, Archie. He's the next Manning that's automatically the best of the best. And that could come with time. And I'm not saying he won't be. He wasn't ready first ball game. He was tentative at least. I won't say timid. Inaccurate, very unusual throwing motion out there on short throws. I like to say inside cuts, you're supposed to throw darts. Outside cuts, you throw bullets. He was drilling that ball a little bit behind, a little bit low, couldn't hit the early throw, and then they couldn't run the football. Take the pressure off of him and run the football. But Ohio State still too strong. Their defense held Texas to less than 100 yards rushing, and that was the ingredient for Ohio State to win the game. But remember, it was a 14-7 victory. You didn't see Texas drop too far because they lost by 7 points to a very good team, and they had a chance at the end to get back in it. He just he couldn't get it done. Archie couldn't get it done as the quarterback, but they had a chance to get back and tie the game up there at the end of the game. So well-fought game. Texas was not what Ohio State was. Ohio State's back where they really feel like they deserve to be the preseason #1 ranked team in the country.
Well, that secondary with Caleb Downs, the former Alabama transfer, shut down all the wide receivers. I'm in agreement with you. And we talked about it in the pregame leading up to this game, that, in the 2 games at the end of the regular season to the Ohio State Buckeyes in the semifinal, lost 28-14, and against Arizona State, the offense could not run the football effectively. 1.7 yards per carry against the Sun Devils. They win a close game in overtime, but don't cover as a 12.5-point favorite. And then they lose outright by 14 points, right, to the Ohio State Buckeyes, and don't cover the 5.5-point number. So, if this team does have big aspirations to get back to an SEC championship game, they're going to need C.J. Baxter, Wisner, the running back, and more importantly, that offensive line to get a push. Now, they won't be challenged this week with San Jose State, but once SEC play happens in a couple of weeks, we'll get a better gauge about where Sark is. Are you shocked, though, from a play calling perspective that he didn't allow Arch to at least air it out? And I understand the defense was basically playing 3 deep and taking away everything. But I told you as well, sometimes you got to force a couple of balls over the top just to loosen up the front
Loosen them
seven.
up.
Were you shocked about that?
Yeah, it was disappointing because they were squatting on the 10 to 12-yard routes. Ohio State was squatting on them, and you got to kind of step on their toes and run a deep ball behind them because you never threaten them deep, which opens up your intermediate cuts by backing them up. They got some crossing routes open, but he wasn't sharp at those, and those aren't going to get you first downs. They're just going to get you a gain, and so they didn't complement the running attack like it should. And so again, I'm going to say this. The teams that actually win championships, their running game is better than that. If there's a knock on Sarkisian, is that in the big games, his running game hasn't been strong enough. And until it is, when you think of the years Georgia won the championship, Ohio State wins the championship, they can run the football. In those years, the running game is there to take the pressure off the quarterback, to keep a great defense balanced so they can't come after your quarterback.
One team that ran the football, I thought, quite effectively in the first half to allow them to go toe-to-toe with the Clemson Tigers was Caden Durham and the LSU Tigers. Now, granted, they only had 105 yards on the ground, but they ripped off some big runs to sustain drives, convert on third down. And that defense, Coach, we were very impressed when we watched that matchup. Secondary was playing great man-to-man coverage. They got pressure with Harold Perkins on Cade Klubnik. And from an athletic standpoint, I think we're both in agreement. That was a dominating effort by Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers on Saturday night.
Yeah, really. I probably bought a little bit of the of Dabo's motivational spiel. This team is as talented as their championship teams. I don't think they're quite that talented. I didn't see a Travis Etienne there or those type of players on defense as I saw in their championship years. LSU had a little better talent. And then to tell you the truth, when you look at two teams that battle it out, LSU may have not outplayed Clemson first half, but they dominated the second half. In fact, should have had one more touchdown. And it was all LSU the second half, which is when if you're going to be a champion, that's when you pull away and win football games. And so I think we saw that the better team was LSU. It didn't by much, and Clemson won't drop much. And because they're in the ACC, they could realistically win them all. They're going to have a tough one probably against Miami. I think that'll be an exciting football game, but it's not quite the same as the SEC where there's 3 or 4 teams that can knock you off because they have as much talent as you do.
Absolutely. Were you shocked about that non-call? I mean, how many times are we going to watch replay? Barry and Brown it looks like a foot and a half in. He has possession. He goes into the end zone. Incomplete. How many times? I don't understand. If 95% of the people watching on the replay see that it's a touchdown, what are these replay officials looking at? If you can't tell within 3 seconds and you have to dissect it, it should be the play on the field or what they call it. I don't understand.
Yeah, I struggle with that one. Again, maybe an official could explain it to me better, but I thought when the ball crosses the plane of the goal line, it's a touchdown. It's over. The play's over, and he went through the pylon, got into the end zone, and yet they called him down later on after he hit the ground. But we've seen a lot of players fumble in the end zone, but they've already crossed the goal line, and it's a score. The play is over once that crosses the plane of the goal line. So regardless, they came back and won it. I'll tell you what, we must remember. Texas had a chance to score on a 4th and 1 quarterback sneak on the goal line. They could not push it in and tie the score up or go ahead because they couldn't run the ball well enough. You know, it was very interesting because earlier they had a 4th and 1 and they ran a quarterback sneak and it got stuffed, but Arch bounced outside and got the first down, but they ran the exact same hole and got stuffed again when it was critical that they score a touchdown late in the game.
We talked about both quarterbacks, Klubnik and Garrett Nussmeier, and I said whichever one played well, if they were winning this game by a decisive margin, it was only a touchdown, that they would potentially move in front of Arch Manning. And we saw that right now with Garrett Nussmeier having a strong performance. He throws for 230 yards. He completes 28 of 38 with a touchdown. Were you impressed with his play? Because I was. He didn't force any balls into double or triple coverage. He waited. He took what the defense gave him, and he put his team in a position in the fourth quarter to win that game. That's what you want to see out of a senior signal caller. Were you impressed with Nussmeier on Saturday?
Showed a lot of poise under pressure, showed what a veteran he is, because there was a lot of hype last year, a lot of criticism that he forced the ball, that he was a Brett Favre gunslinger, would throw it in a crowd. In actuality, they weren't running it well enough last year. He was getting behind, having to throw in long yardage situations, and then putting pressure on him to win the game himself. He stayed within the game. He played the game as it should have been played. Great poise under pressure, great presence, handled the game perfectly. And so I think his stock really went up. If there was a 1A and 1B, if you take Arch Manning out of it right now, as far as the Heisman, you got to say, boy, this guy is up there on top, as well as what the NFL scouts are going to see as the guys are ready to play, because he really showed the kind of player he is in a game where there's a lot of pressure.
LSU does have a home game. Their opening home game against Louisiana Tech. They're huge favorites in that matchup. At the top of the hour, we're going to be joined by Karen McCord, mom of the late Carly McCord. Carly was married to LSU's former offensive coordinator's son. We're going to get her story and just where, she is in the program. She's very close to the LSU Tigers, and she has a pulse on that, team right now. And she sent me a great photo, and when you lose 3 straight games like Brian Kelly has, and especially in a week 1 environment, you told me that you thought he was a little tight. Now you get that victory. The fan base is excited. As a coach, what does that mean for you, knowing that now this fan base is rallied behind you and it's all up from here in terms of optimism with a chance to potentially challenge for an SEC championship?
I think we could have heard probably the exhale if we'd have been near him, as all that pressure just eased out of his chest. He looked great in the post game. His comments were sharp. He kind of jabbed at Dabo for saying both teams played decent, but it was like we both played C+ football. He'd say, hold it now, we played A+ second half. You can grade your team, but don't grade my team. He was getting back at it. But again, I think more than anything, there was a sigh of release, because I think it was getting that kind of pressure, having been a coach, and my brother's a coach and my father a coach, the pressure does get to you. The key as a coach is don't show it. Don't let your coaching staff see it. Don't let the players see it. But you want to win, and you know what you got to do for your job. And so I think there was pressure, but I'm going to tell you, he stood up to it. He got his team ready. He's not afraid to play big games to open the season, because a lot of people opened up with people that couldn't have beat them if they were, it's like couldn't play dead in a cowboy movie. They were so bad. But he plays good people. They haven't had success, but they came through, and I think there was a sigh of relief as much as anything after that game was over.
Coach, you know what I wanted to ask you?
Yeah.
I noticed, and with the OC, and I know this doesn't come up a lot, but with Gus Malzahn, he's calling plays from the sideline. Now we see the coordinators up in the box call it, where you get a better look of the whole field, or Malzahn on the field, knowing and maybe getting a better pulse for you, because you call plays your whole life.
Right.
Did you prefer up in the box or down on the sidelines? Did you get a better look looking at the players on the sidelines making the plays, or up in the box?
You know what? I was a head coach all my life. I started out as a small college head coach. There were no press boxes. Your press box was the top row of the stands a lot of times at these little schools. Everything I ever learned how to do calling plays was from the sideline. Of course, you can see better from the press box. Coaches would love to coach from the press box and call plays. But as a head coach, more importantly than calling plays is leading from out front. You've got to lead. You've got to show your team how to react to tough situations, and you can only do that out front. Now, when it comes to play calling, it's more difficult down there, but I'll say this. When you know your offense, I used to know my offense so well, if you just told me which guy made the tackle and what position, and I knew what position he played, I can tell you where the breakdown was without seeing it because I knew my offense so well. But obviously, you've got to have good eyes in the sky. You've got to have a secondary guy that can tell you the depth of the cornerbacks or how quickly the safeties are coming up. You got to have somebody out there who can look at the defensive line and tell me if they're shifting or slanting so you know where you can't go. So you got to have great eyes and great communication. But it's obviously easier to call plays from the box because you can see it. I've never called them up there because I had to call them always down from the ground. But so did my father, and you get a guy like Jimbo who worked for us and worked for me. You call him from the sideline. The most difficult thing is as you become a head coach and you start to get more and more responsibilities, you have less time to prepare. And I just think, as it did with me, it became more difficult to make those calls. And then hiring good coordinators, they want to call plays. When you hire a good coordinator, that's the first thing they want. I want to call the plays. Well, I know I'm going to call them. Well, I'm not going to work here. You've got to. There's some give and take there. I know I told people when I was at ULM, and I talked Rich Rodriguez into coming back and working for me at ULM. I mean, hey, I'm a play caller. He's a play caller. But if I hire him, he's the play caller. You can't halfway do it. And I wouldn't do that to him, and he wouldn't do it to me. But I think you've got to understand the press box is better. And I also saw post game comments by Gus Malzahn. He says, I'm a better coordinator when I'm not a head coach. I got time to work on the game plan. During the game, I can sit on the bench with my quarterback, look at the dadgum plays, diagram them with him, and prepare for the next series. As a head coach, you got to worry about, do you call a timeout? Do you not call a timeout? And we got to talk about Deion Sanders learning how to call timeouts at the end of a game. And now that I'm thinking about that, he forgot he's the only one that can call a timeout as the head coach. But anyway, I think it's important that you could call it from the box, but a head coach, play caller has got to be on that sideline.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that. And just
Yeah.
quickly, he's got to call the timeout, coach. I mean,
Yeah.
and you and I had talked about this a little bit. I understand you give the responsibility to the OC and the DC, right?
Yeah.
But in that situation, and tell me if I'm wrong, right? That's what made Nick and the attention to detail, knowing that, hey, we have to call that timeout. If my quarterback's not in the game from a mental perspective, I got to call it for him, especially if I'm just looking at the play on the field, right? You say there are times you get caught up in that, but the public pushback is like, well, you're getting $10 million to make that call, right?
Let me tell you something. First of all, understand me. Only the head coach is allowed to call the timeout. No player, no assistant coach is allowed to. There were times when I could go to the official, and he would break the rule. I say, listen, my defensive coordinator, if he's ever late in sending plays in during the game, I mean, I would like him to be able to call timeout. Some of them said, no, you got to call it. So the head coach has got to stay close to his coordinators. And at the end of the game, the last thing, if you got to have a timeout with very little time left, you better not be in the middle of the field when the official that's going to call the timeout is 30 yards away. You got to be involved actively. I'm not so sure Deion was even thinking that he was the only one that could call timeout. But anyway, that being said, the pros are so much better at 2-minute offense or the hurry up offense than colleges are. That we don't. Oh, they're much better. They work on. I'll tell you why. Here's what happened because I've been a head coach since the '80s when we didn't have hurry up offense. Offensive coaches think that because we play no huddle that we can run a 2-minute offense. You can't because it's totally different. You don't throw the ball short. You don't throw the ball less than a first down. It's either first down, out of bounds, incomplete. If you have no timeouts, there are so many things you can't do. But you see the way young coaches are today, they do so much hurry up, no huddle. They think that's as fast. Well, you saw, Colorado, 1st and 10, they threw a flare pass to the back. He got 3 yards and tackle. That's the dumbest. Why would you throw that on first down? All you're doing is running your clock out,
Exactly.
So there's an old rule. You either got to call it, it's either first down, incomplete, out of bounds, clock play, or down the ball. Clock play or timeout. You got about 4 things you got to do. But what I'm saying was that was critical for those of us who know what we're talking about. Colorado had 2 timeouts left, never used one of them in a game where they only needed 1 touchdown to tie the game to take it to overtime. And it was because nobody called timeout. And I got a feeling in that staff meeting they're going to make sure everybody understands the rule. Only the head coach not an assistant and not a player, can call that timeout unless, under some circumstances, I could talk an official and say I would like him to do it for me. But they don't have to say yes, and quite often they did not.
Yeah, it's amazing. And we'll get back
Yeah.
into that discussion. I told you at the top of the hour we were going to have Karen McCord, a personal friend of the show.
Yes.
I happen to know her daughter, Carly. Carly, unfortunately, back in 2019 during the magical LSU run with Joe Burrow, was killed in a plane crash with 4 other people going to the game. But I want to welcome in Karen to talk a little bit about Carly and just the LSU program after that huge victory on Saturday night.
Yes. Hey, welcome. Can y'all hear me?
Absolutely. Yep. How are
Great.
you?
It's so funny that you said that about the huge victory Saturday night. During the day, I was just kind of feeling sad because opening football season just kind of gets me emotional just a little bit. It just kind of gets me down. And the whole day I was down. And then all of a sudden, I received a photo from one of my friends, and it was a big rainbow over Tiger Stadium. And so I got so excited and so filled with hope. And so that night, when we were losing, my husband turned to me and he said, "Oh no, we might lose this." And I laughed and I said, "Nah, impossible." and, and when and when they won, it was just all cheers from Baton Rouge.
Karen, Karen, I live in Louisiana. As you know, I'm in Monroe, but I follow not only LSU but the Saints. Everybody does up here, and it was amazing the path the career path your daughter was taking. How did she get into that and make that? It must have been an amazing story. Just how far she climbed in her time as a broadcaster and a sideline reporter as well.
It was. Well, interestingly enough, how she got into her big break and met Joe Lisi in Cleveland was she was standing on the sidelines with Michael Lombardi at Tiger Television, and she had known every and so anyway, she was working on the sidelines, and she got there at about 7 o'clock and put all of her equipment up and everything. And then about 8:30, Michael Lombardi walks in and he goes, "Excuse me, you're in my spot." And she turned to him. She said, "I didn't see you here early enough to get this spot. You can sit next to me." And so they struck up a conversation and they talked and everything. And he actually hired her to be a character scout for the Cleveland Browns. She was an undercover character scout for the Cleveland Browns. And what she did is she checked out the characters of the players that they drafted and did that sort of thing. And before they would draft and everything, they would check out the characters. And it was a new position that Michael Lombardi had actually wanted to start. And he was very convinced that it was going to go real well. Well, as Michael Lombardi told me in interviews, he said, "Karen, Bill Belichick would call and say, 'What will Carly do? Would she hire him? What kind of character did he have?' And that sort of thing." And Michael then told me, he said, "I really was very convinced that this was the best thing for our program." He said, "But unfortunately, at the end of the season, they let me go and they let everybody else go. And so consequently, they let Carly go as well. But before she left, she turned to Ray Farmer, who was going to be the new GM. And she said, 'Ray, I'm not putting it in terms because I'm not the sports person, but don't choose Johnny Manziel. Just don't go there, with the autograph scandal and everything at the time. Don't go there.' And Michael Lombardi said, had they listened to Carly, they would have saved millions of dollars." So that's how she got her start.
Yeah, and Ray Farmer, for those that, I followed Ray Farmer's career back when he was a defensive back at Duke and Philadelphia Eagles. And Carly she oozed Louisiana, right? She was a 2-time Miss Louisiana runner-up, and we would always, I remember back then, she knew more college football and NFL than than anybody I ever met. We would get into the discussion because big SEC people, SEC versus Big Ten, working in obviously Cleveland, Ohio State, and those arguments. But she knew so much, and she touched so many people's lives over the course of just meeting them. Just talk a little bit about that, because I don't think a lot of people realize she just was a ray of sunshine on anybody she met.
Yeah, that's a crazy thing, because when I wrote the book, I sought out to find the Carly McCord that was an adult, because as you guys know, your parents know you up to a certain point, but then after that, they don't really know your friendships and your work relations and that sort of thing. So I went on a journey to find and interview over 100 people that she worked for and worked with. And, Joe and Terry, the interesting thing is I didn't realize she was that well known. She was just Carly to us. And, it was so crazy. Andy Grammer knew her, but then you could go into Reggie Bush knew her, Drew Brees knew her, Sean Payton knew her, Shaquille O'Neal knew her. I could go on and on and on. And when I talked about these people, I just looked at my husband and I said, this book is going to be so much more than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a grief book, but it actually winded up being a sports book. In fact, it was such a sports book that I had to hire a sports editor. I don't know if y'all know Will Weathers, who works in Baton Rouge, and he had to check all my facts, because she just knew so many people in the football industry. I had to study up and, like I said, hire a sports editor to write the book. And the book wound up being very sports oriented, and that kind of goes with the thing, a lot of times tragedies in sports kind of go hand in hand, because, and then Drew Brees, he gave New Orleans the hope to go on. And so sports kind of takes tragedies and raises them and elevates them to give people, hope that they can survive, and at least hope that they can watch a game, sit down, drink a beer, and say, you know what, for a few minutes, I can, forget my problems.
I tell you, it's. I've got 5 daughters, and I think there's something you can tell the parents who have children who have dreams and aspirations. The kind of confidence you can give them, the support you can give them, and that was the case. Was that the case in your family? You could see what kind of dreams she had and support she needed from her family.
Oh, definitely. We would go support her. My husband and I would sit in the Pelican stands and watch her as she gave away tickets and did all of that. We would go to the Saints games, even on Thanksgiving Day, to watch her work and that sort of thing. And we were just so supportive of her. Although I will be honest with you, as a mom, I worried about her a lot, because sports people are on the road a lot, as you two know, they are always, driving here, driving there. And she would be driving all over from Baton Rouge to New Orleans for the Saints games, Baton Rouge to New Orleans for the Pelican games. And sometimes it would be very late at night, especially those Monday night football games. In fact, there was this, a parking attendant named Henry, and Henry said, Carly, Sean Payton said, give Carly my spot, and then I'll take the spot next to him, because she would walk out so late in the city and he would worry about her. So yes, we did definitely support her, and we were cheerleaders throughout the whole process. But in the end, I do believe that I was always a little nervous about her, traveling on the road by herself, and just doing things. She was so independent, but I mean, my gosh, she moved to Cleveland not knowing anyone, so it was nerve-wracking at sometimes.
Now, the book is Only Rainbows. Where can people pick it up? Could they pick it up on Amazon, Barnes and Noble? Where can they pick it up?
Everywhere that books are sold, they can pick it up. In fact, I was doing a search today. They can even order it on Walmart.com and Target.com. And it did hit bestseller in the football and biography category.
That's
so, like
incredible.
I said, it wound up being more of a football book than I could ever imagine. And if you could compare it to something, it would definitely be to We Are Marshall. Mm-hmm. And I did talk to the author of November Ever After, who wrote kind of the book for We Are Marshall. And after we talked, we just noticed so many common threads throughout the book, even though it was two different situations. Like I said, sports brings people together. Sports show love. And, I can't tell you how many people that we didn't know just reaching out to us because they were watching the game and they were watching the Peach Bowl and they heard the news, and people that I didn't even know, and they would say, I can remember exactly where I was when Carly died, Yeah. And so that's what sports does, and not to get into another subject, but that's the reason why when you get into politics and that sort of thing in sports, it really just is two different animals, because sports is a uniter, not a divider.
Totally agree. And I can remember as well, back in 2019, I was on air when I heard the news and had reached out to Matt as well. Matt Moscona from LSU. We had a relationship through Carly. So just unbelievable. We'd love to have you on throughout the regular season. I have a feeling, I don't want to put it out there, Karen, but I just have a hunch after watching that performance on Saturday night that this could be a magical season reminiscent of 2019. So we'd love to have you on. I'm going to promote the book as well on every opportunity I get. It's been a pleasure today.
It's been a pleasure. And I tell you what, if LSU has to do a repeat with Clemson, I think we've got a rainbow in the sky, and I don't think we can win.
That's great. Only Rainbows. We'll put it out after the show. Karen McCord, thanks. You're the best.
Oh, y'all are the best too.
Thank you, Karen.
Karen's the best. I had met her out in Baton Rouge. We had went the best place out in Baton Rouge, Coach, for a burger's Chimes. I had alligator for the first time. That blackened alligator, and her daughter was absolutely amazing. I had the opportunity to meet her in Cleveland when she was there with the Browns, and then she moved back to Louisiana and was working as sideline reporter, and then was on ESPN out in Baton Rouge and did a fantastic job. And obviously her legacy moves on. But it was interesting in what Karen brought up, and we didn't talk about this, but Katrina back in 2005. And I remember that game when LSU played. But this past weekend, Tulane was on the road in Northwestern. And I don't know if you saw the comments about Summerall, the coach of Tulane. They wanted to honor Katrina and wear white jerseys. And Northwestern said no. Now, as a head coach, and I understand the home field advantage in that type of situation, but we're talking about a 20-year anniversary, obviously a situation that is very passionate to the city of New Orleans. What are your thoughts about Northwestern sort of Xing off and saying to Tulane, you can't wear the jerseys and the uniforms that they wore in 2005?
Well, now I'm glad they got beat so bad.
That's what Summerall said, though, Coach. He said, don't disrespect New Orleans in that capacity. He brought it up in his presser that, like he asked, and they said flat out no.
I've known John Summerall for a long time. He, of course, coached against him was at Troy, but as a young high school, he was in our Bowden quarterback camp that we had for years. That the Mannings they've kind of copied it now that we stopped doing it. But you know what? I guess I'm too sensitive to things like that. and it would be. I couldn't say no to a situation like that because of what it means to the other team, and it's just a jersey color to Northwestern, but it means so much more to the other team. But again, um, you can't control what other people do. That's fact of life, and you go forward.
Would you use that as motivation the way Summerall did?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine, yeah, I mean, it would disappoint me, and I would tell my players, and I would hope it disappointed them. And who knows? Maybe that was part of what went on to get them ready for that game. I don't know.
We'll see another SEC battle, and I don't
Yeah.
know if you saw it, took place
Oh, I
on
did.
Sunday afternoon. Lenora Sellers in South Carolina started a little bit slow. This was like a 10-5, 10-8 game.
Yeah.
Then they busted it open with a late kickoff return, and then Sellers just hits Carter over the top, and they get the winning cover. It was blue collar. It wasn't pretty, but they got the job done. Your thoughts about that performance? Because Lenora Sellers now potentially could be that guy, almost like a Cam Newton type of player where he could take the SEC over.
Yeah, I mean, he is that talented, and he gets your attention just with how big he is, how strong a runner, how strong an arm, and his talent level. But my impression was that Virginia Tech was playing pretty dang good. It was
Yeah, they were.
10-8 in the fourth quarter, and Virginia Tech was getting after them as well as South Carolina. It was just a good, hard fought battle. And one that I felt like, boy, Virginia Tech, because I thought they may get run out if they weren't careful, because South Carolina can play pretty good, and they finished so strong last year. But it's still there. South Carolina still the better team. Lenora Sellers, I will say this: he got sacked 4 or 5 times. He took a safety because he didn't have good pocket presence at that time. He's got to get a little better pocket presence. If you remember when he he got tackled for a safety, he looked left. Then he looked back to the right. You don't do that when you throw out of your goal line. You take one look and throw the ball to the receiver or throw it away. Then he got sacked a few times. He is a talent, but they've got to get that cleaned up at South Carolina because there's too many good pass rushing defenses in the SEC for him to have to deal with that. So get their offensive line cleaned up a little bit. Didn't play a great game, but the Beamer ball came through. They got the punt return for the touchdown. Yeah. And that just pretty much iced the ball game. Then the bomb later on made it look a little better than that. But it was a good win for Shane Beamer. I must have got 1,000 letters from him when he got through playing to be a GA. He was, and then he called me. I was a coach already at Auburn, and he called me and said, "Should I be a GA for my dad, or should I go somewhere else?" I said, "Let me tell you something, Shane. My brother upon me, I wouldn't trade for anything in the world the time I got to coach with my dad."
Right.
If anything, go work with your father. Don't worry one bit about what other people say. You're not going to have a chance. And he did, and he was on his dad's staff, and that meant a lot to him. And now look what he's doing now. And you saw in that game how proud his father and mother were, and of him being the head coach at South Carolina against their. Because I mean, Virginia Tech is Frank Beamer. I mean, that's a name that's married together, just like Bobby Bowden in Florida State. And that was awful good to see. But anyway, very good team, great quarterback talent. It'll be interesting to see how well they play. But a little better offensive line play going to be needed when they play in the SEC.
He felt like he was similar to you, right? Legendary head coach. Yeah, he wanted to reach out to see your thoughts. That was pretty good.
Absolutely.
To reach out, and now he's one of the better coaches in the SEC. I'll say this. You think Justin Fuentes, you don't think Virginia Tech, that's for sure, right? He ran that program into the ground after Memphis.
No, Frank Beamer, I can admit. And you know what? He had about 5 years where they were about to let him go. And they took a chance on him after 5 because he was building a program. And people nowadays would never give you 5 years, but he was slowly building it. Then boom, 6 year it took off, and he became the greatest coach ever to coach at Virginia Tech. Shane was a walk-on, ended up being, I think, a long snapper or a snapper on the special teams. And it's those kind of overachievers, the guys that have to work for everything they got, that I think make the best coaches. And that's the case. And very much like me and my brothers coaching for my father, he starts out coaching for his.
Absolutely. And I'll say this, thinking about your dad's last national championship, you think Virginia Tech, Michael Vick, and what that meant to the Hokies and just, revolutionizing, the quarterback position. I always say there's certain quarterbacks back in the day that were ahead of their time. And I know Mike Vick, but if Mike Vick played in today's college game,
Woo!
I mean, you got to be kidding me, Coach.
Yeah,
He might rush for 3,000 yards back in the day. No,
no, if you put him in no huddle, fast break, shotgun, throw or run, zone read, that kind of stuff that's going on, he'd have been. He was already unstoppable, but he was you kind of knew where he was going, and you still couldn't get to him. It's one of those things I say about Barry Sanders. He's so talented, he makes athletic people look unathletic. In the NFL, I think Michael Vick had that kind of talent, and Virginia Tech kind of a. Well, Florida State had to fight their butt off on that one to win that national championship. We were there. Me and John Saunders were in the end zone as ABC as we had the pregame and halftime show for that game in 1999.
Yeah, Peter Warwick took that game over in the second half. 29-year-old Chris Wenke, right? that was back in the day. I mean, I remember that game like it was yesterday.
But let me say this thing. Remember, I wanted to tell Archer, maybe Peyton or Eli. I said, listen, Chris Wenke was my dad's 27-year-old freshman quarterback. I think in the second game against NC State, he threw 6 interceptions in one game, in either his opening game or the second. I said he went on to become their all-time leading pass receiver ever and the Heisman Trophy winner. So there's going to be better days for Arch Manning down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the problem with the perception is just because he's a Manning. Right.
Exactly. That's
right. We anoint him the second coming of a 6-time Super Bowl champ without even stepping on the field for a top 10 battle. Now we get that body of work. Okay, you lost it. Let's call it what it is. Peyton Manning never beat Florida during his tenure in Knoxville, right? So it wasn't until T. Martin, takes over in 1998 with Peerless Price in that group. But unbelievable, so we'll see what transpires for Arch. They have San Jose State. San Jose State, a lackluster performance early on in that battle against Central Michigan. We'll see if they can regroup. I mean, Texas should pace them in that matchup. But I guess from a mentality perspective, you always got to worry with the letdown, right? Because, you get abused by Ohio State. You're the number 1 team in the country. Now you're at home. Here comes San Jose State. I mean, that's going to be a tough ask for Sark to get these guys sky high after last week, right?
Yeah, but they're so talented. I think they'll come out and want to respond. They'll want to play well. I see the problem is after you have a big win and you play somebody that you just are supposed to wipe off the field and you don't mentally get into the game. I think that loss, I think there's a bad taste in their mouth. I don't say come off a loss. I think it's easier to get up for a low-level team after a tough loss than it is after an easy victory because it's hard to get them to watch video seriously after, and when you're playing a team that's not really 40-point underdog or whatever.
The other big matchup, and we're going to dive. I guess the U is back. Give them the national championship. That's it. They won it on Sunday night. Let me tell you, we have talked about this game ad nauseum, right? Yeah. But I'll give credit where credit was due. I was wrong about Notre Dame. I thought Notre Dame was the more physical team going into that matchup. Miami proved me wrong. Offensive line protected Carson Beck, 205 yards, 2 touchdowns. C.J. Daniels with that amazing one-handed catch. I mean, in game 1, Mario did the job. Now, the problem with Miami is, can you maintain that over at least a 12 or a 13 game regular season?
Well, I mean, I think that's going to be the key to the coach rallying the team together, getting them to be mature, getting them to be understanding of the kind of week-to-week focus you've got to have. And that's what a coach does. And a coach that wins championships or a coach that takes his reputation to the next level. When you win a championship, that's kind of like golf winning a major. You got to go out there and be able to get your kids to respond each and every week. So Miami, that'll be. I mean, they got to be hungry and they got to be excited. Defensively, I thought they got after it, and they closed. They closed on defense. When all they saw last year with them either blowing it and Cam Ward having to come back for a miraculous recovery or not having enough to come back. And that's kind of what they did week after week last year. So, again, I thought good performance. There's a long season ahead. they've got a few teams. They've got to play Florida. They've got to play Florida State. If they win that, then they've got the Clemson maybe for an ACC championship game. There's a lot of big games left, and for them to play. But it was a good finish. I was more disappointed. We talk about Notre Dame not being as physical as we hoped they would be. They didn't run the dadgum ball. The old Pat Dye, run the damn ball.
We're gonna run it.
They never gave it to Jeremiah Love very much.
I know.
Run the ball. I just thought I'd see more of him because the more reps you give him, it only takes one breakout. It only takes one great run, and he goes 50, 60 yards for a touchdown. All of a sudden, it's a different game. And that was the only thing. I thought they could have taken a little pressure. I will say this. When I look at C.J. Carr, and how he handles himself and the maturity and how the feel that he had for the quarterback position, I think he's going to be a classic quarterback at Notre Dame. And down the road, they got one that can lead them to a championship too.
I agree. I think the play calling early on was great out of Denbrock. First drive, he comes out, he gets Carr into a rhythm. I have no problem with the bubble screens and they get across midfield. But then all of a sudden they get a little handcuffed. He tried to run it on first down. I still would have played action on first down, and see what you could get when the quarterback's hot like that. But again, I agree with you. They rushed for 94 yards. They rushed for 180 yards per game last year. You have Jeremiah Love that averaged well over 5 yards per carry with 13 touchdowns. He only touched the ball with about 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. You can't do that. Again, here's the other thing, too. We talk about these bubble screens to the left, to the right. That's fine. When you have an attacking sideline where they're fast, you want to neutralize them, run a post pattern, and run a dig route underneath and flood the middle, and at least you have levels. Why didn't they do that? Because Carr looked poised in the pocket. I don't understand it.
Well, again, Joe, I'll say this. One, I'm big on making vertical routes. I think the biggest thing you can do if you want to run the football, back them up. If you want to throw intermediate cuts, run enough takeoffs where they're afraid you're going to step on their toes and take off. There is a large argument. I didn't just make it up. You watched almost every team we saw throwing slip and bubble screens out there. The theory is make the defense widen out, cover it all the way to the sideline. Now make them cover deep. And then you run the ball between the tackles, or like Tennessee did a couple of years ago. Problem is, I think you're not supposed to throw the bubble unless it's there. Too many people are throwing it, and it's a waste of downs when there's no big plays out of it. The big plays come from vertical throwing the ball.
Well, you know what you could do off that? Tell me if I'm wrong, because again, you have 28 plus 40 years of coaching. I just know what I know to a degree. So you want to run bubble screens, that's fine. Where is the fake bubble screen? Attack it vertically with the pump fake. Where is that? They don't do that anymore.
Well, they will. What they do, most coaches say, okay, bubble, bubble, bubble. All of a sudden, as soon as we see them coming up too quick and not playing proper defense, we're gonna chop down and then run by him and run the play behind his back.
Right.
That comes a little later on. But again, I think there's a little too much bubble screen than what we need because we got to attack them vertically. Like I say, we can get to a long discussion, but I wish you'd go back to 2022 and watch Josh Heupel at Tennessee using Herndon Hooker, and they attack people 16-yard out routes and vertical post and takeoff. And the safeties were so wide and the outside backers were so wide. They didn't run the bubbles that much, but they ran them a little. But they tacked you vertically downfield, and that's why the running game opened. To be honest with you, people are still so afraid of what they did 2 years ago. They've become a great running team just because people fear they're going to throw deep. Alaba did not throw a very good deep ball. He was the worst accuracy, and we found that with UCLA. He wasn't very accurate again on Saturday. It's the same problem. Tennessee didn't lose anything. He was not a great accuracy quarterback, and it killed what they used to do at Tennessee. If the new quarterback at Tennessee can throw, and he threw a perfect deep ball. If he can hit the deep ball, Tennessee can come back to being really a contender as far as one they're just right under that right now.
I agree with you. Now, I think they actually got an upgrade with Joey Aguilar.
I
mean,
do
the
too.
kids,
Oh, I'm
the
with you.
kid, just from a personality perspective, and I don't
Yeah.
want to label Nico in any capacity, but again, you're walking around, you're soaking in big games. Come on, you don't want to see that out of your quarterback. And oh, by the way, he's asking for $2.5 million when the school already gave him basically what, a 1.5,
Yeah.
1.7. I mean, come on now. But Joey Aguilar elevated this offense. They put up 45 points. They dominate and cover the game against Syracuse. I was shocked on how many points Syracuse got on them, but I guess from just a tempo, when you're running so much tempo, that defense at certain periods just wears down, right? Can Tennessee be like they were? Now, I know you said it hinges on Aguilar, but could they be like they were in 2022 where if Aguilar elevates his play, that defense is still good enough to go with the likes of LSU, Georgia, and some of the others?
I think it is. I haven't seen enough of them this year, but whether you throw bubble screens or takeoffs, the defense going to have a chance to be great no matter what. I just think you have a chance to go out there if you can throw explosive plays into your offense and play ahead of people as opposed to behind. You got a better chance to win a lot more football games. That's the difference in them. No, they are committed to running the football and they are committed to playing defense. I just think once you add the explosive vertical routes back to their game, and that's why I think the quarterback has a good soft touch. There's a saying, my dad had a favorite saying, 200%, there's 200% rules in athletics. Short putts never go in and overthrown passes never get caught. And
Right.
problem is everybody, long passes never get caught and short putts never go in. And that's why we always teach our quarterbacks to throw a little bit short. A pass that's 4 inches short is still caught. A pass that's 1 inch too long is nothing but a big incompletion. That's what a lot of quarterbacks can't do. I think Aguilar has a chance. Joey Aguilar has a chance. Is that how to pronounce his name? I've got to make sure I get that right. And he beat me when he was at Appalachian State. I lost a game to him in my last year at ULM. He was pretty daggum impressive at throwing that football there.
He was, and I think your dad also had a great saying when talking about Peter Boulware, the edge rusher. He had country strength, right? He wasn't really,
stuff.
no weight room guy. He just had country strength where somehow, some way, he used to find a way to get to the passer, right? Before you go, and this is great because we're talking quarterbacks and development, and Coach and I are going to be on later in the week. We'll try to get maybe one or two more of these in, breaking down the slate. There's two other things I want to ask you before you go. One, your former offensive coordinator at Akron, AJ Milway, the offensive coordinator and quarterback coach with Texas and Arch Manning.
Right.
What have you seen from AJ throughout his development to potentially get the most out of Arch? I know he got the most when he was the OC and quarterbacks coach at Akron. I mean, your offense at one time was flying. Could he elevate Arch to the next level?
I think AJ is going to be. Well, I think he will be fine at teaching Arch fundamentals. Now, Arch is part of the Manning quarterback camp. Arch has been trained on fundamentals in his family forever. AJ just got to make sure he stays on it, goes through his routines, go through his practices every day. Because I think the young man was trained at an early age with his fundamentals. Now, AJ was the Harlan Hill is the Heisman Trophy of Division II. AJ was a runner-up as a quarterback for the Harlan Hill Award as a small call. He's a little smaller guy, but he was great. And then, of course, he was an analyst at Alabama, and that's where he met Sarkisian and went on with him. But again, Sarkisian's going to call the play. AJ was my offensive coordinator. Now I call plays, so I had a rule. Your job is to call the game plan. Your job is to make sure every play on the game plan sheet works, can be executed. Just make sure you get it ready in practice. But AJ will do a great job. He's a great teacher. And Sarkisian is clearly the quarterback guy. He was an old quarterback that stays with it. But AJ, he'll be a head coach one day. But right now, he just got to make sure he can keep Arch calm and feeling good about himself and not worried. And I'm sure his family gives such incredible support. That young man will get through these difficult times, and he'll be better quicker than it will be later.
The other one is Auburn. Great road win over a Baylor team that could put up points, right? This was a high-scoring affair. Now, I'll credit Jackson Arnold. He got the job done, But the problem is he got the job done on the ground, over basically 70 yards on the ground, and the passing game struggled. Have we seen enough in that performance that if the rushing attack isn't there, Jackson Arnold isn't going to be the guy that he was in Norman against Tennessee and against Ole Miss last year?
Well, the rap on Hugh in Auburn is he throws it too much. Now, Jackson Arnold was 11 for 17, 65%. That's not bad.
Right.
They didn't give him the opportunities. We'll see down the road. And he even said, I didn't imagine myself running it so much when I came here, because he sees himself as a quarterback that can throw. We'll see that, but I do believe I saw enough that I say this guy can lead them, because they asked him not to throw it very much, but to run it. He jumped on it and did a great job doing just that, and iced the game with that final score. So I think he gets an A for just running the offense as they wanted it run and giving them something to hope. They were just disaster last year. And Auburn had no turnovers from the quarterback, no turnovers on the team, had a special teams touchdown. Only weaknesses, they had 8 penalties, and they've got to cut those back.
Yeah, and you think about last year, Auburn, one of the worst turnover margins in the nation, -9 overall. And if you think of Auburn's success, they have a mobile quarterback. Go back to the days of Cam Newton, Nick Marshall. Those type of quarterbacks were able to at least get Auburn in the conversation and obviously win a national championship with Cam and Gus Malzahn. Jackson Arnold, he throws, to Coach's point, 11 of 17, 108 yards. He also rushes 16 times for a $137, 8.6 yards per carry, Coach, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Personally, I don't think he's built for the long haul like that to carry the rock the way he did, but we'll see how this season plays out.
Yeah, good. That was good, and that was a very good Baylor team they beat. That team. Now I've got SMU popping, and we'll talk about that later on.
Yeah,
but I've got SMU. SMU is 15-1 at home, and they don't lose a lot of. They are 15-1 in their last 16 games. So I don't. Baylor may be 0-2 to start, but they're going to have a good year at Baylor too. A very good football team, very good quarterback.
Coach and I are going to be on later in the week. We'll be breaking down all of the matchups, including that marquee battle in Norman, Oklahoma. We got 16th ranked Michigan, 18th ranked Oklahoma squaring off. Right now, Oklahoma, 5.5-point home favorite with John Mateer. He stepped up with a dominating home performance to the home win last week. We saw Michigan step up with Bryce Underwood. For Coach Bowden, I'm Joe Lisi. We'll see you on the next episode of We're Gonna Run It. Have a great day, everyone.
Hey, Joe, are you still there? I lost you.